Take our picture.
After this, I'm going to put it to revenge.
Yeah.
Okay, what am I doing? Just of you guys?
So,
Yes.
healthy.
No, but I didn't say one thing.
They're not looking.
You have to say something.
All right, they're looking now. They're not smiling.
Are they in the picture? Yeah, I didn't, no, they gotta sit closer. This is a ridiculous photo.
All right, you have to sit closer.
Okay, go.
Stand it in the middle.
Yeah. Well, I can't get far enough away if I stand.
Yeah.
That's not the middle of the house, the middle. See how far back they
Your
can
eyes. Eyes.
get. You know. I didn't get Logan's feet.
Nobody cares about that. I'm gonna make food now and tomorrow. Okay.
Is that your child?
Also,
Oh, okay, yeah, for tomorrow.
there is no comma after now. Hey, if it wasn't a journalism major, I would be quiet.
I mean, why does he have to tell us everything?
Because he must.
We send the photo.
I hope until
Those people got their beach.
Did they really? That is so awesome.
They are trying to indict that woman. Emmett Tills.
Yeah, they need to.
She did.
No, she's not. She's very much alive.
Unless she died.
No,
No,
stop it. You don't
there's.
know what
I don't think it's the actual woman, but someone who was complicit.
No, I think it's the woman. She was still alive. She said she was guilty.
Right, that was a few years ago. She was like on her deathbed.
The woman who killed Hamilton. So, all this year.
That's it.
Am I going on Friday? Oh, it's 12. Yes, I think I can get there. I have to leave.
No, I'll go pick it up and I'll be home on Friday.
Dan's home on Friday. Then I come. Okay. She's still alive.
Okay, I believe you. I said I believe you.
She's
What's her
alive.
name? Dorothy?
Catherine. Carolyn.
I saw on Twitter like really.
Yeah, I don't think they need to.
Alright.
Oh, Lord.
Doing introductions, standing up. It's on? Yes, okay. Hello, thank you all so much for joining us. And to the virtual audience, hello. This is Left Bank Books presents National Book Award winning author Jason Mott, who will discuss the 2021 National Book Award winning and national bestseller, Hell of a Book. You'll be able to hear me better.
Good idea.
Tonight's event is possible because of your support. When you support Left Bank Books, your money goes directly into the local economy. It helps keep our bookstore open, but it also helps keep your streets paved, your libraries funded, your parks free, your schools free, and so many other things making St. Louis a better place. So I would like to thank you all for shopping local and for supporting this event. Also, when you support Left Bank Books, it helps us bring in more incredible authors like the amazing Jason Mott. I'm Shane Mullen. I'm the event coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis, including Evan, who is back at the table over there. And I have the great pleasure of being in conversation with Jason about this evening. So I'm very excited about that. We are doing a lot more in-person events this summer. We are still going to be producing virtual events and doing hybrid events as well. So like tonight's event, we are producing that into the virtual world. So if you are unable to make it to one of our in-person events, check and see if it is also being offered as hybrid, so you can check it out either live or as a rerun. And be sure to check out our event calendar on our website, left-mint.com, for a full list of our programming for readers of all ages. Personally, I am super excited that Ruth Ware is coming all the way from the UK, one of my favorite mystery authors, on July 20th for a ticketed event. And now, about tonight's book. I could spend the next half an hour just listing off the awards that this book has won. There are so many. If you want I don't even think it's a complete list, but if you want to see how many lists or how many books, how many awards this book has won, check out the page for this event and just see like a huge chunk of just award after award after award after award. So deserving. This is an astounding work of fiction from New York Times bestselling author Jason Mott. Always deeply honest, at times electrically funny, that goes to the heart of racism, police violence, and hidden costs exacted upon Black Americans and America as a whole. In Jason Mott's hell of a book, a Black author sets out on a cross-country publicity tour to promote his best-selling novel. That storyline drives hell of a book and is the scaffolding of something much larger and more urgent. Mott's novel also tells the story of Soot, a young Black boy living in a rural town in the recent past, and the kid, a possibly imaginary child who appears to the author on his tour. As these characters' stories build and converge, they astonish. For while this breathtaking and magical book entertains and is at once about family, love of parents and children, art, and money, it's also about the nation's reckoning with a tragic police shooting playing over and over again on the news, and with what it can mean to be Black in America. Who has been killed? Who is the kid? Will the author finish his book tour, and what kind of world will he leave behind? Unforgettably told, with characters who burn into your mind and an electrifying plot ideal for book club discussion, hell of a book is the novel Mott has been writing in his head for the past 10 years. And in its final twists, it truly becomes its title. Jason Mott has published 4 novels. His first novel, The Return, was a New York Times bestseller and was turned into a TV series that ran for 2 seasons. He has a BFA in fiction and an MFA in poetry, both from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. His poetry and fiction have appeared in various literary journals, and his most recent novel, Hell of a Book, was named the winner of the National Book Award for Fiction in 2021. Now, if you would all please very kindly help me welcome to the stage the incredible Jason. All right.
It's a terrifying introduction.
The glowing praise is just going to continue for the next half hour, 45 minutes, so. Get it this time. There we go. Hi, Jason.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good. So this was supposed to be the first night, or the second night of the book tour. This is the first night.
Yes.
And we host a lot of author events throughout the course of the year. I have never hosted an author event like the author events described in Hell of a Book. So what am I doing wrong, or what are other stores doing that are absolutely kind of off the wall?
I don't know. I think you're doing it right. If you're not doing events that really are a novel, you're doing it right.
It's such a pleasure to have you back in St. Louis. We hosted you for The Return when we were all big fans of the book at the store, and I'm just so happy to see you getting the recognition that you have deserved for a long time.
Thanks.
So how many of you have actually read the book? And it's
Nice.
so we have a couple people, so we can't have spoilers, and we have to worry about the virtual audience as well.
Okay.
that was part of I was like, okay, I can't do, like, I have to avoid certain things, because this book, I mean, I couldn't put it down. I just was captivated from page one. So I hope you had the same experience. I'm guessing you did, and that's why you're here. But I'm wondering, when did you know, or who was the first person to tell you, like, Jason, this book, it's gonna change things?
Oddly enough, it was a friend. So I've got a small group of friends, like 4 or 5 people that I met back in college, like decades ago. And I always, they're my beta testers. Whenever I'm writing something, I send them the first drafts, and like they read it before my agent, before anyone else reads it. And one of my friends, it's funny because I had been texting her as I was working on it, because I'm very secretive about things I work on. I don't tell people what it's about. I just try to like give them a cold reading as much as I can. But I texted her beforehand, and I was telling her like months before I even gave it to her, I was like, this book is terrible. Like, it's the worst book I've ever written. It's gonna fail in ways that things have never failed before. I was just really talking trash about it. And I sent it to her, and she emailed me back. She was basically like, holy shit. She's like, this is very different in all the best ways. And so I was like, okay, cool, that's a good sign. And then my other 2 or 3 readers, like they kind of had similar responses. But I still was very suspicious of the book's possibilities, because I knew it was a weird book, for lack of a better term. And weird books don't necessarily sell very well or like get attention, or like they're like weird people. They're hard to find a crowd. So I sent it to my agent. My agent kind of said she was in love with it. So yeah, there was a string of people who believed in the book long before I ever actually believed in it. Like, I'm still in shock of what the book has done.
Where were you when you found out that it won the National Book Award?
Oh, when it won, there was a whole virtual ceremony. So I was sitting in a small office at a campus, dressed up in a musty old office and just staring at a computer screen, as we were wont to do in the Zoom era of communication. But it was a very surreal, weird experience, because it was a very dystopian experience. So the way it was structured, there are 5 categories for National Book Award, and there are 5 finalists in each category. So the night of, they put you in this virtual green room, and there were never people of the same category. So for instance, the room that I was in had 1 person from poetry, 1 person from nonfiction, 1 person from young adult, myself, and 1 person from translation. So you're never in a room with people in your same category. So the way it worked is, when they called your name, like your category came up, I'm sitting there, like I would see the person's face appear on the screen. And so you're watching this person as they find out whether or not they just won the National Book Award, which is like the biggest thing that they've probably waited for their entire life. And then if they didn't win, they just disappeared in this very scary dystopian way. It's like, so because you would watch it and they were like, and the winner is so-and-so, and it wasn't the person. And then like 3 seconds later, it just go dark and they're gone. And the next person came up and it was just like, same thing, they disappeared. It was very weird. I wonder if you Google those people now, like, do they still exist?
Yeah, scary. Who else was nominated? Wasn't Colson nominated with you?
I think he was longlisted. So I remember Robert Jones Jr. was in, Laird Hunt, Lauren Groff, and someone else that I'm missing now. I cannot think of who it is. But yeah, so it was very tense. And by some miracle, like I was sitting there, and they were, going over like the 5 finalists. And in my head, I was doing what I call my apology tweet. I was going to like apologize to my friends. I had all my friends had taken the night off of work and like, paid for babysitters so they could stream it and watch it. Everyone was like just throwing watch parties. And I was like, they're going to be really excited, but I'm going to lose and be really sad. And then all of a sudden they called my name and I was just stunned. It was the weirdest, strange. I'm still kind of adjusting to it. It's very strange.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's get into some more of the meat of the book.
Let's do it.
I'm curious about the naming of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know from the very beginning that, like, especially, I loved how they didn't have names so that they were almost more universal, but then the very specific characters that did have names, I forget the name of the woman who was Katie, that had multiple iterations of
Kelly,
yes. Yeah, multiple iterations of the same name as different characters. Again, making a very forgettable, but like kind of one person. So you could almost make an amalgam of those women into in his mind, which he did in his mind. So I'm wondering, did you know from the very beginning they're not going to have names? Like, it's going to be Soot, it's going to be the kid, it's going to be the author, and like, at what point were you? Was it solidly like that?
So I started off from the very early beginnings. I wanted to do it with characters not having names. It's something I actually tried before in a previous book, and like just in the process of editing and revising, like as it went on, it was basically kind of like, well, you can't really do that. Characters need to have names. Readers want to know who people are. I was like, okay, fine. But this book, I was kind of writing. I didn't have a contract. It was just my passion project outside of everything else that I was doing. And so I was like, well, if it's my project, I'm gonna go through what I want. So I'm gonna do a book and see if I can actually pull off a novel where characters don't have actual names. They just have these secondary names. And about a quarter of the way through it, as I was revising, I kind of chickened out for a draft. Like, there's a whole draft where I gave the main character a name. I can't even remember what it was because it was so terrible, and it just ruined everything the book was trying to do. Like, as soon as I did it, I knew it was a mistake. So I was like, nope, let me not do this ever again. So I revised into the next draft and just took all the names out. I really leaned into the component of, what names are and like how they identify us and like what that conversation is about. So that's when like the Kellys began with all the same names, and I just kind of started playing with it more because, again, it was my passion project and no one was waiting for it. So I was like, I'm just do what I want with it. So I was kind of having fun with it, experimenting and trying to see if I could pull it off.
Yeah. Were there any books that because one of my other favorite books, it also does a very similar thing. So I'm wondering if there were any books that you had that you saw to kind of inspire and let you take control.
Not so much in regards to the name thing. Like I'm a big Hunter S. Thompson fan. It's like there's a lot of Hunter S. Thompson in the book. Like that feel of Hunter S. Thompson, hope is there. So there's that component of it. I'm also just a big fan of like movies, so the Coen Brothers films, things like that, all kind of inspired it and led to it. So yeah.
I think the microphone went out.
Yeah, we did go out.
Yeah. How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia is another phenomenal book that I think warrants comparison. Where the characters don't have names. It's the father, it's the mother, it's the son. And he does it. You did it amazingly well and named the characters that I feel needed to be named and left the vagueness and the I think if you had named the author or like revealed it at some point, I think it would have been like, I don't want that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. How did you balance the humor and the heartbreak? And I know this is like one of those questions you're probably like, it's my own magic. Like, I'm just that good. But like, did you ever? How confident were you with including so much, like, literally laugh out loud humor in this book that is dealing with race in America?
Well, honestly, I wasn't. So I'm not sure if I was confident or very insecure. I was kind of in the middle where, again, because it was this thing that I was just doing on my own, I kind of figured my friend would read it and nobody else would. So I was like, well, if no one's going to read it, I can do what I want with it and just have fun. And so at that point, obviously, I'm not known as like a comedic writer, but my friends think I'm funny. So I was like, I'll just make some jokes for them and I'll add the comedy in. But the comedy also serves the purpose. Thank you. Perfect. The comedy also served the purpose of making the heavier moments more endurable, not just for readers, but also from a writing standpoint. For those who have not read the novel, like, obviously we have read it, like, there's some heavy moments in the book. There's some very difficult things to write about. There's some very, I had some very personal revelations and personal explorations that I had to deal with in the writing of it. And it made for a slog, like a depressing, sad slog of writing. Like, when you read a sad scene, it was sad for the author to write it. So part of what kept me sane and able to kind of keep writing was that I needed to laugh too. So I would spend a week or two writing this very heavy, very dramatic, very hard scene. And then it's like, okay, I need a break from that. I need to laugh. So I'm going to go back and work on this scene that is pure comedy, and I'll make it as absurd as I can manage and as far over the top as I can. That way I get to laugh as I'm writing it, and hopefully people will laugh as they're reading it. So that was why the comedy kind of came through. Kind of it had to be there. Like, there are books that are, tough, who have, like, I tell people there's nothing new in a book. It's a conversation that's been running for hundreds of years, quite frankly. And there are plenty of other authors who have had this conversation in a very heavy, high gravitas kind of way where there's never a cracked smile, there's never a laugh. And I realized that's awesome for them, but that's not who I am as an author. Yes, I love having very serious conversations, but I want to chuckle at the same time too, because life is rough. We can just do the sad parts all the time. So that was kind of why I focused on that.
Do you have a favorite humorous scene?
Yes, by far my favorite scene is the infamous Nick Cage scene. I'm a huge Nick Cage fan, like I have been for like years, and I don't do it in the ironic way that some people do it. Like, I'm just a genuine, I think he's one of the most brilliant actors of like the modern era for a dozen reasons. But it's funny because that scene with Nick Cage came at the 11th hour of the book. Like, it almost was never there. So my agent and I were revising before we were sending out to the editors. Because again, like, we hadn't sold it to anyone yet. So my agent is a very hands-on agent. She likes to be a part of the process. And I think she's wonderful at what she does. So there was a scene that got cut. But the scene was like a gratuitous sex scene. I can't remember why it was there. But my agent was like, no, this has to go. This doesn't do anything. You need to delete the scene. And I was kind of being like an impetuous child, but also kind of not. I didn't want to cut the scene. I was like, I like the scene, but I knew she had a point, because she always has a point. She's good at what she does. So I emailed her back, and because I had a few references to Nick Cage in the book, but nothing really major. And I had wanted to put him in the book, but I was scared. I was checking out for reason. So I emailed her back on a whim. And I was kind of being funny, but I kind of wasn't. I was like, well, if I delete the scene, I'll put Nick Cage in the book. And she replied back, I dare you. Go ahead and do it. I was like, I will, whatever. So I spent like 4 or 5 days, like literally less than a week, writing that scene with Nick Cage. And immediately it fit. Like it didn't solve, I won't say it was solving problems, but it unified all the things the book was trying to say, and it galvanized things that I knew I was trying to say, but I hadn't managed to like put it into one moment. And somehow the Nick Cage scene did it. So that became my favorite scene, because I was afraid to write it, because like there's no way I can't put Nick Cage in the book. It's crazy enough as it is. I can't just write him into the book. And then I did, and it worked out wonderfully.
Mine is probably the naked football. Yeah. Just was rolling with that.
It's a fun scene.
Yeah, loved it. Taking the other side, the heartbreak. Did you have any sensitivity readers, and did you ever have any of your early readers say, maybe this is too far?
No, I didn't have anyone, so I don't really have any sensitivity readers. My friends all, we've been friends for decades, so like they have a pretty good sense of where the book is. Like, so I tell people the book is very semi-autobiographical. There's more of me in the book than people will honestly kind of know. And so when you give the book like this to close people that you know for decades, like they know where the lines are. They know which parts are actually you, which parts are made up. And so the feedback I got from a lot of friends was more of concern and worry, because I am a very private person. Like, I do not like talking about myself here right on stage. But I'm an introvert, quiet person. Like, I struggle with doing presentations, and more I struggle with like sharing parts of myself. And so here was this manuscript where, for people who know me and can spot where the things are, like I am sharing tons of things with strangers. It's thinly veiled, but it's still there. And so I had a lot of people who care about me who were just like, are you sure you're going to be okay with this? Because one thing I've learned in publishing is that like, once you say the thing or you put it on the page, once it's out there, you can never get it back. Like, people, readers, interviewers, like if you tell some very personal part of yourself, it is no longer yours. It becomes a part of the conversation, and that will recur again and again. So I have a lot of friends, and my agent as well. I have a lot of people around me who are just like, are you sure you want to say these certain things? Because like, I know this is the moment directly a part of your life. This is your part of the story here, and you're going to have to talk about it. It will be painful. Are you okay with that? And actually, I thought about it for like a few weeks, and the indecision was, like, I think it's time. I'm at a point where I'm okay with having these discussions now, and so we kind of move forward. So there wasn't a sense of you going too far. It was a sense of you've gone farther than you usually do. Are you going to be okay with that?
Actually, what time is it? Because I want to make certain that I leave enough time for all of you guys' questions.
Yes, I love questions from the audience.
All right. The small town where So is from. Is that based on where you were from?
Yes.
It feels very real.
Yeah, it's very much based on the town that I live in. So in the novel, the character, Soot lives in a town called Bolton in southeastern North Carolina. I live in a town called Bolton in southeastern North Carolina. Very small town, literally like 800 people. I live on a dirt road. Just got internet like 2 months ago. It's that rural. And yeah, so that's kind of what I was saying about how like there is a lot of me in the book. And so there are events in the novel that are taken directly from events that occurred in that small town. And so the people there are very aware of that. Obviously, like when they encounter the book, like they know, oh yeah, this thing actually happened, and they know the dates and the time and the people that it happened to and all these kinds of things. So that part of it is very, very personal.
Refer to my notes. Let's take. I want to open it up for you all while I kind of formulate my next thought.
Got a trick question or something else?
No.
Yes.
We just have covered most of the broad topics that I wanted to cover, so I want to see if there are any things out there that other people want to discuss. Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious about what the people in the town feel like. Everybody knowing their business, their town.
Yeah, so the people in my town, like they're very proud of me. Like I am the local boy makes good kind of thing. So people there are very, very they're very proud. We just kind of say it that way. But as for like the events that occur in the book that are actually based off of the events that occur in the town, like they're actually really glad that someone was able to talk about them and put them to the forefront of like a larger discussion. Yeah. Because people often forget, like when you hear about police violence, racism, like you hear about these topics, you picture larger cities, you picture New York, LA, Baltimore, St. Louis, like you picture anywhere but some small 800 population kind of town, and yet these things happen there as well. So for the people that live in those communities, and it's funny because like when I tour, especially when I tour around North Carolina, I do a lot of rural kind of events and like rural libraries. And those are the people who seem to be even more invested in the book and like in what the book has to say, because like they like seeing that like these things happen here too, and someone actually wrote something about that and discussed it. So they're very happy about that. So it's been really positive. Next question.
Do you find, since you said that this book is quite a bit different from your other ones, but it seems like you have a lot of through lines. So I'm wondering, what are the things that you want to see in each of your books that is like a goal of yours?
So that's a good question, actually. So I'm a big fan of imaginative storytelling. Like I always have been. I think all of my novels, they're either high concept in the sense that like the world is different, or like now with Hell of a Book, it's more of an embracing of this imaginative kind of state, this imaginative storytelling. It's funny how you can be influenced by people at different ages of your writing and different phases of your writing kind of progression. So when I was younger, when I was in undergraduate, I wrote a lot of, really wild, imaginative, like far-fetched kind of stories where like it was doing, the story was doing backflips and sideways flips and cartwheels and technically doing 8 different things. And I was just trying to do like this really insane kind of storytelling. And I think I was doing decently at it. Like I wasn't, amazing, but it was something I was really passionate about. And then I had an instructor once who kind of like came down on that real hard. Like, and this is not to talk trash about them as an instructor. It's just to say like, people's opinions matter to you in different levels at certain phases. And so the instructor was like, the hardest thing to do is just tell a story from beginning to end, like a simple story without the bells and whistles and the gimmicks, but like just tell a simple story. And so I took that to heart, and I looked at like the writers that I love. You know, I love John Gardner, I love William Golden, I love Toni Morrison. Like they're all very, I would argue, like straightforward kind of writers. And then it's not to say that that's a bad thing, or it's just to say like structurally, the philosophy by which they write is one of lead the reader at pretty steady kind of pace in a certain kind of way. And so I was like, okay, I gotta write like them. That's what good writing is. They won all the awards. I'm a big fan of theirs, so I should write like they write. And so I put away all the experimental, imaginative, crazy, quote unquote, crazy stuff I was doing. And I began writing in a much more linear kind of fashion. It still had flourishes here and there. There were still like multiple story arcs going. Like every one of my novels has these vignettes that also tell the story in addition to the main narrative. It's something I've been doing for decades now, and it's just something that I do and I love doing. But that was the extent of it. And so with Help a Book, weirdly enough, because I was writing it just for myself, and because I had some weird experiences in like the publishing side of things, I just said, you know what, I'm gonna go back to being weird and wild and have fun. So I'm gonna have weird story arcs happening and multiple things going on, and the tone is gonna shift, and the character's not gonna have any names. And I was like, I'm gonna just make it the party of a book that I wanted to write for like decades now, and go back to the way I used to really love writing, with this freedom of creativity and this challenge of like, can I make all the madness work? And that became, obviously, became Help a Book. It goes on to be like, the biggest book of my career. So that's very, very validating and very kind of empowering to us. Like, oh man, I don't have to write like these other people to be successful. I can actually be myself and find success in the way that I want to do things. And I think that's one of the hardest lessons to find in life. Like regardless of what you're doing or who you are, that's just a hard thing to actually embrace. So that's been very, very cool.
Have you been able to imbue that advice to other authors?
Yes, I very much. It's interesting how so when you win the National Book Award, suddenly like students and like young writers, just people like they listen to what you have to say. And it's very terrifying. Like I'm used to no one paying attention to anything I have to say, and now like if I teach somewhere, if I teach on occasion, not frequently, but like on occasion, or if I'm just at an event, I'm talking to people. Like people really listen to what I have to say, and so I make a very concerted effort to, yes, offer advice about what I think writing should be and how I think writing should work. But I also reinforce to people that like you can make writing what you want it to be. You do not have to write the way that I write. If I give you a certain piece of writing advice, you do not have to take that. You can find your own path and still achieve success. So I definitely try to steer other people in a direction that like you can do it your way. You don't have to do it my way.
What are some of your fun tour stories? So the last time you were here in St. Louis, because there is also, so I'm told there's a Cardinals baseball player that is also named Jason Mott.
Yes, yes.
I have no idea.
Yes.
So I did not realize that there would be any confusion at all. But there was a family that showed up that was like a parents and then
Yes.
a kid, and the kid was kind of disappointed and sad. The parents were like, actually, this book sounds really good. So it kind of wasn't the worst. But I'm wondering if you have any kind of maybe awesomer
I mean, that was pretty awesome. That was a pretty cool moment. It's funny, so we were at the bookstore, and this woman comes in with her son. He had to be 10, 11 maybe. He's wearing the full baseball jersey. He's got the glove in his hand, he's got the ball to get signed. And like, they walk in, and like, I'm standing there, and like, they're looking around. Obviously, it's like, posters of me, and it says Jason Mott. Like, the mother comes over, and she's like, there's been some mix-up. I'm like, oh, really? What's going on? And I looked, and I don't follow baseball, so I had no clue about any of this. And she goes, yeah, like we came here to get a book signed by Jason Mott. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. And it's like, no, you're not Jason Mott. I kind of am. And then she's like, no, there's a baseball player. So I Googled it, and it's like, oh, now it made sense. All of a sudden, like, wow, this kid is dressed up in his baseball uniform. And they were great sports about it. We actually had like a little laugh about it. She bought a book. At the end of the day, she bought a couple books that I signed for him. I felt terrible for that kid though, like, because he was, actually he had his whole uniform on and everything. So that it's definitely one of the. It's a positive story, but it's definitely an awkward moment on the tour for sure.
And that kid's in the wings now.
Exactly.
He's here and he's now your biggest fan.
That would be so awesome.
What I was gonna ask. I was gonna ask something of the audience. I don't know when it just completely went away from that. Any other questions? I know. Didn't you have some questions? Put me on the spot.
We're teachers.
Are the author and the kid the same person?
Ooh, you hit a really awesome
I've been
question.
wondering that the whole book.
And I know, and I'm not going to answer it for you. So, let me explain that. Yeah, like there are questions about the book that I do not answer. Not because I'm a jerk, because I hope I'm not a jerk, but I do it because like there is intentional ambiguity built into the novel. It is designed to start discussions, and it is designed to make you wonder, are they the same character? Because if you decide they are the same character, it makes the book say a very specific thing about America and violence and all kinds of things. If you decide they're not the same character, it also makes a very specific statement about all those same topics. And so I leave that open for readers to decide for themselves, whether or not they're shaking their head like I hate these people. So that's why I leave that question unanswered. So sorry.
But do you have an opinion?
Do I have an opinion?
Yeah.
Of course, I got thousands of opinions.
On your deathbed, like, might you reveal whether it's the same or not?
No.
I mean, is it
That's
ambiguous?
pretty
in your
morbid.
mind? Is it ambiguous in your mind, or do you actually feel like you know?
No, in my mind, yes, I have what I consider to be an opinion. I'm not gonna tell you, but I have one. You're awesome. Yes, ma'am.
Did you start writing before George Floyd, and then how much did that like influence like your? Because obviously you wrote about your hometown, but I'm sure that national events had a big part of it.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, this began far before George Floyd. So in 2013, my first novel came out, Returns, and I was on a book tour, like a massive book tour for that, for like literally 2 months of being on the road and traveling, and like it was very insane, very wacky. I got horror stories, I got humorous stories, I got love stories, and all kinds of stories from that 2 months of like being on the road. And when it finished, I told my agent I want to write a story about the author on a book tour, and she was like, "That's a terrible idea." I was like, okay. So I went off on my own, and I wrote about a half a manuscript that was kind of just a collection of anecdotes, a little bit of fiction. It was just about an author on book tour. It was a comedy. There was no discussion of race or America or anything like that. It was just a comedic story about an author on book tour. I wrote 2 more novels, and time passes. And then in around 2018, I believe it was, when the Baltimore riots happened and those events were going on, I've got a friend who lives in Baltimore. Every day for about 3 weeks, he and I would have these 7 a.m. conversations. We'd wake up, call each other, because he's also a black male living in Baltimore around, and the Freddie Gray incident occurred, the riots were happening, the city's burning. So I was honestly just calling and say, "Hey, are you okay? Like, how? Because his family's there, his wife is there, like he's got a life there." So I was honestly just checking in on him, and we would talk for like an hour every day for like 3 weeks, and it started this chain of us unpacking the Freddie Gray incident, the riots, America, our lives as black males, incidents that occurred to us. Like we just unpacked a lifetime of memories and thoughts and feelings about the subject matter. And this is 2018, and at some point in that, I was kind of getting overwhelmed. I was really depressed because like you spend 3 weeks digging through your life of like hard stuff, and like you just get depressed. And I was really overwhelmed. And I told him, I said, "I don't know what to do." I was like, I feel like I'm imploding. Like I just can't carry this stuff anymore. And he said, "Dude, you're a writer. Don't you write something about it?" And I was like, "It's a great idea." So I started writing these small pieces. Didn't know what they were going to be used for. I started writing these small pieces that were kind of thoughts, my memories, my thoughts, my experiences, kind of some fiction. It's kind of like I was doing with like the thing I did with the writing. I took all that baggage and feelings and anger and sadness and horror and all that stuff. And I wrote like 150 pages of just stuff. Didn't know what it was. And so I had this pile of very heavy, dramatic stuff, and I was like, what do I do with this? And my brain said, remember you kept wanting to write this story about an author on book tour, it's so funny, like, why don't you mash these two together somehow? And so that is when Hell of a Book came into being. I kind of went back and just put these two things together and started building them out into their own novel. And it's funny, because we sold the book, I want to say, we sold it in 2020, right before like the summer of 2020 exploded and everything kind of happened. That is around the time when we actually sold the book. And so it was weird because we sold the book right at the beginning of everything that was happening. And obviously we didn't know how the summer of 2020 was going to turn out, like how big it was going to all get. But that's when we found a publisher and sold the book. And then it takes about a year. Like when you sell a book to the time it hits bookstores, it's about a year process. You still spend about 3 or 4 months revising with your editor. And so we were revising up until early fall. And so the George Floyd incident, the whole riots, everything that summer had happened. And we had a lot of serious discussions about like, do we include any of that? Like, what do we do with like everything that has occurred this summer? Like it fits with the narrative. And yet I didn't want, the main thing, I didn't want to be like, I didn't feel like I was like capitalizing on the George Floyd thing. Because I knew that people would be doing that. And like, there's this race, when something big happens, there's like a race. It's like, oh, okay, we get the book out first that talks about this thing. And I didn't want my book to become that. And so the final decision, I was talking to my editor about, the final decision was just the realization that like, apart from George Floyd, the book still has merit. It still applies. Like George Floyd is an incident of the things the book is a symptom of the discussions the book is having. It's not the other way around. And so we chose to kind of, I think, if I remember correctly, there's like one brief mention of George Floyd in the book, or like that incident, but it is passed over because there will always be a George Floyd incident. It's a sad truth of America. There will always be that recurring. Until we solve these institutional problems, it will always be valid. And it will always be a contemporary book, as sad that is to say. So that's kind of how the George Floyd thing worked out as far as like the selling. Because again, the book was kind of locked and done as all that stuff was happening. So we couldn't go, there's no way to go back and just change everything. So that's kind of how that happened.
I forgot that I wanted to ask you about the title.
Oh yes, the title, Hell of a Book. So it's funny, that was not like fun piece of trivia that you would never get asked ever in your life. I have yet to title any of my books. Every book that I've written has been titled by someone else. Apparently I'm good at like making the words between the pages, but I'm not good at making the words on the front of the book. Because I try every time. I'm gonna title this book, and my agent always just like, this is terrible. So sure enough, her and I were trying to, we were in the 11th hour finishing the book up, and we just needed the title. And I knew, like, her and I have been together for 10 years, so we both knew Jason's gonna drop the ball on the title. So about a month out, my agent was on, she's so nice, she's trying to be nice. She goes, start shooting me titles. Let's start working on the title. We got about a month before we send it off. So I want to like get ahead of this. Let's get a title for it. I was like, all right, cool. So I sent her like, over the course of the month, I sent her like at least 15 different titles. And every time she was like, ooh, no, this is not a good title. And so we were getting to like the 11th hour, and she goes, she looks back through the book, and she goes, I've been talking to some friends who are also agents, and they read the book, and everyone here, including myself, we should just call it Hell of a Book. And I was like, that is a terrible idea. Because I thought it was just such an arrogant, pretentious title, which again, like, as someone who's a nervous introvert, like, that's not what you don't want a title that draws that much attention. So I was like, no, that is the worst title ever. It sounds so arrogant. Like, 'cause I remember years back, Dave Eggers wrote Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius. And I remember seeing that book in the bookstore and being like, the nerd, like, who does that? And of course, it's an amazing book, so why would you? But so I was like, no, that's a terrible title. I was like, the critics are just gonna rip it to pieces. Oh, hell of a failure, hell of an almost good book. Like, the criticisms are just lining. You just give it to someone a plate and you call your book Hell of a Book. And so my agent goes, look, unless you have a better title, which I know you do not, I think we should just go with this one. Because the title that I wanted, so when you open the novel, it says Hell of a Book, or it has this very long title. That's what I wanted to be the title. And so I said, the only way I'm going to call it Hell of a Book, if I can also call it this other title, this very long, absurdist title that I have. And she was like, okay, fine. So her being that it was outsmart me as she always does, yes, it still has my title, but it's tucked away inside the flap jacket. The actual title is just hell of a book. So my agent nailed that, as always.
I'm a really big fan of big, long, super long titles.
Yeah.
So I would have been like voting
Thank
for
you.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. Validated.
Was the title of the book in the book?
Yes.
Hell of a book. The whole
Yeah, yes, in the manuscript from the beginning all the way through, it was, the author had written this manuscript that just everyone referred to as, oh, it's such a hell of a book, it's such a hell of a book. And he never really kind of got, the idea was you were never going to get the actual title of the book, and you were never going to find out, like, is the book I'm reading actually a hell of a book, or is the book, like, there was all this ambiguity that, again, is very much built into it. But that phrase, hell of a book, was always there. And so that's why my agent was like, it fits on so many levels, it just fits to call it that. And she was right, that she almost, pretty much always is.
I mean, I think she did. Voted correctly.
You should hear it once in some of the interview.
I'm sorry, what's that?
You consider it to be some of the interview, like for other people.
Do I consider it to be an easy read? I don't know.
Like emotionally.
Emotionally, no, I hope not. Emotionally, I hope it's a very challenging read. I hope it's fun, but I hope it's also a very challenging read. So no, in that context, I would say no, I don't think it's an easy read, because I feel like if it's an easy read, you're a very numb person. That's a very scary thing. Because the book was meant to be provocative and to like make people uncomfortable and to have tough moments. And so if someone's kind of like going through that, I think it's rough. But it was definitely meant to have easy moments. Like I've definitely put in like things that were meant to be comedic. Things like I call it coming up for air. Like when I write, I tell people, I always talk about how like when you do the heavy things, the very serious dramatic things, you're essentially like pulling your reader underwater. Like there's stuff there. They're trying to get, they're tense, they're tight, you're emotionally committed, and there's all this just physical tension that builds up from reading. And you hold them there for X amount of time, but you've got to let them come up for air at some point. You got to let them breathe. And so that's when the comedic running down the hallway naked and just weird scenes like that kind of show. Nick Cage appearing out of the blue, like those when they come up for air moments. And then as the book progresses, it starts mixing those two things together to where you think you're coming up for air, but you still get some very seriousness, and you think you're unlearned, you still get some comedy. And like the book kind of begins with this very big separation of like comedy and drama, and then as it moves on, the goal was to like blend them together to where at the end, the lines are all blurred.
I will say I've had some very real conversations with some of my coworkers about this book and other books, and some of the books that we haven't liked, we refer to as like drama porn, where it's just gratuitous and it doesn't add to the conversation. And what we have agreed is that this book is not drama porn, that it isn't gratuitous, it adds to the conversation. It has very, very real emotion, very hard emotion, but the emotion is necessary. And it's necessary not just for the book, it's necessary for me as a reader. It's, yeah, I mean, it is a roller coaster. It's a hell of a book. I can rave about this book forever and try not to reveal too many details so that people are still so encouraged to read it. When I finished it, I just told every single staff member, it was like, you have to read this book. Like, you just have to. I don't want to tell you more about it. I just really want you to read it. And I think a few of them, like, I think they always think that I'm very glowing towards books because I'm very passionate about books. But when I tell people, like, this deserved every amount of praise that it got, like, that's not me saying, like, I thought this book was great. I'm saying other people thought it was great. And you should just agree with what I think that they said. Yeah.
That's awesome, thank you.
I'm just curious, what is your process for writing?
My process for writing. So I'm a very, I call it a blue collar writer, where I get up in the morning at 5 a.m. or 5:30. I go straight to the computer and like I write until about midday, it's like 11 or 12. And I do that about 6 days a week. So like I have a work schedule that I have to stick to. No one's allowed to interrupt it. Like I can't like take them. I take days off. I gotta make them up here and there. So I try to treat it very much as that kind of process of just, it's like punching in. Like I punch in the morning and I work and put in my hours and then I get the rest of the day off. And so that's kind of the habit of writing, because writing, like anything else, like it's like a muscle. You need to maintain it and you kind of keep doing it to progress and get better at it. And then with novels, I typically start out with, if I have like an idea for like a character, usually I'll have a character first, and then I'll find like a topic that I want to write about, and I kind of find the two that are compatible. I've got multiple characters up here; they're just always floating around. So I try to find a character in my brain and this topic that are compatible, and then I do like an outline to see if like I feel like there's an actual novel here, or if this is something that should be shorter. And if I'm able to do the outline, then if the book still has passion, I'm still excited about it, then I'll go ahead and just commit to trying to write a novel. And that takes, a year and a half to 2 years is kind of my schedule on novels. Most of that is revising, like just constantly revising, going back. I tell people writing is actually the act of revising. That's not anything new. That's a common statement. It's so very true. So yeah, I think that's the rough highs and lows of my writing process. You got a question there?
No, I do.
Okay.
One is about your writing process. So if you're writing a novel, which is like a good start, but the part about today is that like the little snippets that you said, the first snippets and like just get up in the morning and write down whatever happens to you, pass it to your attic and not actually looking at it.
Yeah, so if I'm not working on a novel, which is very rare, if I'm not working on a novel, yeah, I've got a few files on my computer that I call like support files. That's just kind of the name that I give them. What they actually are, they're kind of just brainstorming files where I'll put in, headlines that I see in the news somewhere like that sparks some thought that I want to like study up on and go back to later. Weird science articles that I come across, weird social articles, just random expressions my uncle next door says, like country sayings and like thoughts I had about something. So I've got all these files on my computer that are just completely disjointed thoughts. It's almost like it's like Lego blocks, like it's just a Lego pile of like thoughts and ideas and titles and phrases and just everything. But then what happens is, as I'm doing that, eventually because I look back through it every once in a while, and eventually I'll start to see like recurring themes. Like, oh, you got like 8 different things in here about this one topic. Maybe that's something you're actually interested in, and maybe that's something you want to like focus on and dig into closer. And so once I begin to see the patterns, then my brain starts to like put it all together. It's like, oh, that's why you were thinking about this, because you actually want to figure this thing out here. So that's kind of how that happens. But again, like I'm almost always working on a novel. Like it is rare, very, very rare for me to not have a novel to work on. So yeah.
Right. My other question was, in the spectrum of the conversation about race and everything else in our country, do you have a particular audience in mind?
I do not have a particular audience in mind, because it's interesting. So part of the novel is there's a discussion in there about how as a Black author, like you're kind of assigned an audience, and you're kind of expected to have a certain audience, and you're expected to like, there are just certain expectations that you have. Anytime you're a minority writer, this isn't just Black male writer, this is, any minority writer, Black female, LGBTQ, Native American, whoever it is, the publishing industry has like the bean counters to the marketing and sales numbers, and like, this is your audience. And like, even if it's not your audience, we're gonna make it your audience. We're gonna make sure we market to them, because if they're, if they're Black, they're gonna like it, they're liberal, whatever. Like, so there's a lot of that going on. And what I've been trying to do, what I have always tried to do, but I'm more direct about it now, is my audience is anyone who wants to have a discussion about this topic, period. And that can be whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, whatever. The audience that I try to write to is just anyone who is curious about how we came to be in the state that we are in, and like what that means. So that is kind of now my audience. I try to have a very specific demographic audience. I just try to like write and let the books find their audience on its own. Yes.
So I'm only a little bit halfway through the book, so my question can be totally answered as I read.
Okay.
But is it all connected, like how Seth's grandfather taught Seth's father how to hate Black people, how the author forgets that he's Black there in the book, how like all that, is it like somewhat connected?
I'll say yes, they are connected, but not in like the way that you might be expecting. If you're looking for a very linear A to B to C to D, I would say talk to the lady beside you. But on a larger scope, they are very much connected. On a larger, you pull back, there's definitely commonalities and threads and like uniform habits and experiences that the book is trying to talk about.
I think I just realized that it was very early in the book that I dropped my expectations. And
Good.
and that doesn't normally happen with when I read, because a lot of times I read more purpose of like finding the audience and who can I recommend this book to. I just very early on was like, I'm going to fully envelop myself in this book.
Good. It's funny because like that was very much the goal, but that was also the thing that I was most worried about when I was writing it. It's like I told you, like, I really, it's hard for people to really believe. Like now the books, win the National Book Award, people are like, oh, of course you always knew the book. Like, no, like you don't understand. I truly believe that no one would actually be interested in this book because of the fact that I knew that in order for the book to work, the reader would have to take a leap of faith. At some point, they would have to decide, I don't really know what's going on. I'm mildly confused, but I'm compelled. Like that was the goal that I was shooting for. Like mildly confused, but compelled. Like I told my agent, and like I told you before, like I want people to think of it as a fun house. Like when you go into a fun house, you get all kind of weird feelings and things are happening, and like you're confused and you're excited and you're nervous, and like there's this kind of ball of emotion. But you still feel safe for the most part. Like that there's an exit somewhere that you're gonna be led to. Like you're not gonna die along the way. At least hopefully you don't. But like fun houses are meant to be these places where everything is distorted, everything is strange and weird and fun and offsetting and all these things, but it's planned. It's gonna lead you somewhere, that you're gonna come out the other side and be okay. And so I knew that's what I wanted the book to do. I wanted the book to be this very meandering maze that went to strange places and did weird things and like pulled the rug out from under readers, left, right, front, and center. And I knew there was a point about a third of the way through where people would just be completely confused as to what was happening and who characters were and were they the same person, are they real, are they connected, like so many things. And so that's a very terrifying thing, I think, as an author, to like hope that you've done that job, you've done your job well enough that your readers are like, yeah, I'm confused, but I'm enjoying it, so I'm gonna keep reading. Because I personally, I quit books so easily. you have no idea how many books I don't finish reading. It's like some people are very much like, they're like completionists, so they're like, if I start a book, I gotta finish it, not me. Like, if you cannot keep me in I give you 30 pages. If you cannot keep me and like really have me just wrapped up and like in love with the book, 30, I got other things to do. I'm gone. And so I knew that as someone who has that habit, I knew that like I would be testing that for other people. So I was really terrified. Like I knew in my brain as I was writing, I was like, yep, people are gonna they're gonna back off about like 70 or 80 pages in, they're gonna just quit. Because there's so many things that are contradicting and confused and weird that readers are just gonna just quit. And so I was like, yeah, this is my greatest failure. So I was like, it'd be fun writing, but no one's gonna read it. They're gonna just quit at about 80 pages. And then people didn't quit.
So since you are such a discerning reader, I'm gonna ask the hardest question of the evening. What have you read recently that you enjoyed?
So right now, actually, this is not a new book. Right now, I'm reading Bloodroot. I cannot think of the author's name right now. My girlfriend's gonna kill me because it's one of her favorite books. I'm reading through it. But I'm reading Bloodroot. Now I have also read Robert Jones Jr. The Prophets. Like he's become a good friend, so I read his book. Not just because as a friend I'm reading your book, but because like it's actually really good. And so I think, yeah, that's probably my current, like my last book, but I'm reading Bloodroot right now. I need to find out who that is. I can recommend it. But
Amy
she's-
Green.
What's that?
Amy Green.
Yes, Amy Green, thank you so much. I highly recommend that book to people. Like, I've got like maybe 50 pages left in it, and I'm just loving it all over.
You've got honestly stumped me. I don't know anything about this one.
You gotta do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is it
it's
a
an
genre?
Appalachian, it's an Appalachian family drama. That's like the closest thing that I can do. It's like 3 generations of Appalachian family and just their kind of experience. But it was extremely well written. As someone from the South, like who knows a little bit about Appalachia, like it's very true, but it's also very, it's got master realism, it's got a lot of things going on, but it's just very layered and very rich. Excuse me. And the writing is just really good.
Can you pull up your book? Sorry.
No, I
Counterfeit.
There you go.
That's one that I
Ah.
just similar to yours. we
Okay.
read about.
Sure.
And it's race bonus book club.
Nice. Very cool.
I think it's going to be an award contender just like yours.
All right.
Watch next season when all the awards are announced. If that one's not on the list, I'm going to fight someone. Unless there are any other questions, we want to move to the signing.
Yeah, sounds close.
All right, I want to give you another giant round of applause for you both. All right, so we'll do the signing in the back of the room, and I'll do Post-its. And I want to thank you all so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much.